Well, good evening. Thank you for being here tonight with us. We do appreciate you coming on out. I'm certainly no expert. That's why they are here. So we appreciate that. So we're going to let our panelists introduce themselves. If you are very familiar with Keystone Partners, we appreciate that. We appreciate the relationship we have with you. If you're not as familiar with Keystone Partners, I can tell you real quickly about Keystone. Myself, my name is Matt Abaticola. I'm on the business development team for Keystone and have been with the company for 18 months. I have the pleasure of moderating my second HR forum. So Keystone Partners was founded over 40 years ago. We're headquartered in Boston. We are an organizational consulting firm. We specialize in leader transformation and career transition. That says a lot in a very few amount of words. Enough about me and Keystone. Let's meet our panelists and we'll get into our discussion. So let's go right down the line and you can introduce yourself, talk about your experience and what you do, who you are.
Sure. Thank you, Matt. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking the time. And again, thanks to Keystone for having us be on the panel. I'm really excited to share with you some of the things that I've been doing at Ideal Industries. I'm going to assume that most people may not know about Ideal. It is a 100-plus-year-old family-owned business headquartered in Sycamore, Illinois. The products that we sell, think about the electrician, dying breed. We all need them. So we actually supply tools and that for electricians, but the other exciting part of our business, when you think about the green agenda and the electrification of many things, not cars, that's not our industry, but our business really is about standby power. So think about telecommunications. If something were to go down, we actually provide solutions for that, or we do things related to being able to create charging solutions. So think about, for example, in California, all those standards are making their way across the U.S. So when you're lawn and garden and you go to one of the big box retailers and everything's green, some of our products are tucked inside, making that electrification happen. What I'm going to be able to share with you is within Ideal, this is a values-based organization, and so I'm very excited to talk about some of the things that we've been doing to create an ecosystem to drive employee experience and engagement. I can share with you, I was with a former company. We had some missing ingredients, so I tried to do the same thing in a different organization with very different results. So we've got a lot of things to be able to share. It's an exciting time. I think we all know as HR people, every day is different, and this panel is really incredible, and I'll turn it over to our next colleague, Nicole.
Good evening. Can you all hear me without the microphone? Okay, so now you know something about me right away. I have an awful fear of microphones, but I have no problem talking or raising my voice in a good way. So Nicole Britten, I am the Vice President of Human Resources with Goodwill Industries of Southeastern Wisconsin and Metro Chicago. That is a mouthful, so thank you for putting up with that. We have about 5,000 employees, actually 5,400 employees across our territory. We serve annually about 42,000 individuals, and we put about 4,000 individuals across those territories to work. So a lot said in a small amount of time. First I want to know, who's shopped or donated in the last 12 months? Thank you, because what you're doing is you're helping put people to work. So as many of you know that shop and donate, or maybe some of you don't know, your donations in shopping help us run that successful retail business that then provides us our ability to serve and deliver our mission into our communities. So much, much appreciated. I would say, one of the things that I'm excited to talk about today is really around our, how we're really leaning into our growth model as we continue as a workforce development agency, and how we really lean into that growth model and how we have been challenged in the HR space to be able to do that over time when you have, two different territories and you have a pandemic and you have all the great things that we've lived over the last several years. So I'm really interested in hearing where the conversation goes tonight, really interested in your questions, first and foremost, and thanks for being here and thanks for having me and us.
All right. Hi, everyone. Chris Mason. I lead a portion of our HR team at a company called KHE Distributors. So we're a food distribution company. We do primarily organic, natural, specialty foods. So if you're local here and you go into a Fresh Time or a Fruitful Yield, that's mostly our product coming through our warehouses and what we do is we're supply chain. So we're warehouses and we're truck drivers and, and all the quants that, do the buying and moving stuff around. And a lot of these grocery stores, by the way, it's all grocery. They don't actually like to go out into the farmers markets and find the next cool, fresh thing. So that's what we do too. So you don't know us maybe by name, but you'll hopefully have eaten some of our products. Whole Foods too, we're a little bit, our biggest competitors, bigger in Whole Foods. We won't talk about that, but go into any organic aisle and any Jewel as well, and we're there. So that's us. We're about 7,000 people now, and we've got kind of $8 billion in revenue. So we're not huge, but we're getting bigger all the time. And so I lead a lot of the Center of Excellence teams around HR tech and systems, talent management, total rewards, and then I just absorbed our talent development, learning and development team, so we got to go hire for somebody, actually. So if you know anyone, that's my one plug. Shameless plug. But anyway, so that's why I'm here, excited to talk about, I'm just passionate about kind of the future of work in general, but certainly a lot of our folks are in types of roles, whether it's truck driving or warehousing, where augmentation of work is a big deal, or automation of work, where there may not be humans in some of those jobs. And so we're always thinking about that. How do we take care of people? So it'll be a fun topic to talk about today. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's give our guests a nice big round of applause to start off. Thank you. So our topic, our headline for tonight, Quantum Leaps in HR, Bridging Gaps in Tomorrow's Workforce. And, you mentioned like tomorrow's workforce. And it's fascinating to me because I'm sure back in 1919, the Spanish flu, they weren't going back to work and saying, all right, so tomorrow's workforce, what's it look like? But here we are after 2020 and COVID-19, and everything has changed within the workplace and the workforce. So when we say that, bridging gaps in tomorrow's workforce, what does tomorrow's workforce, what does that mean to you? What does that say when you hear that?
We're just going to go in row. Do you want to start, Michele?
Oh, anybody wants to jump in, and then, just share thoughts.
I'll start. Then we'll mix it up a little bit.
We'll mix it up. Let's shake it up.
We're
Let's
setting
start
the
it.
pace. Okay. So, I think that question, first of all, the workforce of the future, I think the first thing I think about is the connection and the connectedness to work and how work has changed over time. I think as you read and you think about different generations, we are moving into a generation of I want to work my way. And I don't see that necessarily changing much as we go into the future. I think individuals and people are looking for not just a job. I think they're looking for a connection, not just to people, but to the work that they do as well. And I think that's going to be really important. I know we've had some time together to talk about it. And I think the other thing that's important is and I've said it since the pandemic, I don't think there's going to be a new norm. I think that's going to be the one consistent, is that there isn't going to be a norm. I think the pandemic button that I like to reference has really shown us something different. And I think if we truly want to be agile in terms of, we've said that a lot, right? We want to be agile, we want to be flexible. Well, I think that's what we're going to need to grapple with in our workforces. There's an expectation for that. And how do we create connectedness? How do we create flexibility? How do we create jobs that help people grow and develop and mobilize within our own organizations and move to other organizations to continue to advance and grow? So when I think about the workforce of the future, I think about connectedness, I think about flexibility, and I think about a world where we are really going to have to continue to be okay with disruption, and we're going to have to be okay with thinking about things a different way from an HR perspective in our organization. I'll hand it over.
Sure, I'll be happy to build from there. When I think about the workforce for the future, I think probably the biggest change is I think about my early career when I started in the 90s. Many of the approaches were monolithic. You thought about hourly, and you thought about your salaried workforce, and you might think about it nationally. And when you consider this level of flexibility, or when you consider the diversity that you're going to have in the workforce, and the number of generations that we're going to have in the workforce, like specific for my organization, we've got about 1,000 employees globally. And we are very heavily skewed towards boomers and my generation Xers. And so if we're going to be successful, I actually have to really focus on talent retention. And so talent retention might require some of those more traditional things that are in direct conflict. to things that new entrants in the workforce that I'm desperately trying to attract. And so for me, when I think about the workforce for the future, I've been pushing my organization to try and embrace different ways of thinking about work. I absolutely agree that when I talked about the values and action, that's the same purpose-driven piece that you just heard Nicole speak about. People want to identify with an organization that does good. They want to know that what they do matters for the time that they're spending there. And I think ultimately, the ways in which people, they have higher expectations from organizations around development. And so that's the other key piece. If I think about where I was earlier in my career, I would say organizations could always kick the can when it came to development or about leadership or some of these other things. They were nice to haves. They're now table stakes.
That's a good way of saying, yeah. I do think we kind of stopped doing development for a little while and then kind of realized, okay, there's a whole generation that had to grow up, and they didn't get it in the way some of the traditional, kind of companies used to sort of run everyone through those leadership development programs. Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking like when you think about the workforce of the future, where I do like to start is a little bit of what you're saying, which is, well, what won't change? Like there'll still be humans doing some kind of work. There may be fewer types of jobs, or no one does the buggy whip job anymore, right? It was what I always said in school. But there's going to be something that people will do, and they're going to care about the meaningfulness of their work and the dignity of that work, right? And they're going to care about connections with other people. So there's certain things that won't change. I think HR is actually well positioned to be useful in the future, because I don't know that you ever will fully want to automate or use ChatGPT just to have a human interaction. And so I do think some of the skills of the future will be some of the things HR is actually good at, which is working well with people and leading people, et cetera. So, but I also just think the things that are going to change is the pace of change just keeps accelerating. It's like, some of whether it's a skill set or a mindset, whatever you want to call it, being absolutely almost change fluent. Just change champion. You just live in a kind of a flow of always knowing you have to change, is going to be something that everyone's going to need to get good at, and it's going to keep accelerating. But I do think the human interaction is going to increasingly be more important, because we're going to be able to automate some of the more mundane stuff. I don't think we're going to automate electricians, though, very soon. I mean, what's so interesting is the stuff that gets automated isn't what you'd expect, right? It's going to be hard to automate the tow truck driver that figures out how to get the car out of a ditch, but a lot easier to automate the paralegal that can go look up and reference information. So it'll be fun to see where that goes.
So, Nicole, you mentioned about working the way I want to work, my way to work. And I think that will move us into like a new normal. Like that will be the normal. I want to work the way I want to work. And I think it's interesting because it's not really just a generational thing. I think a younger generation has brought that to the workforce. But even an older generation, I joined the workforce in 1989 as a cashier at a sporting goods store for $3.25 an hour. And I thought I was like, the richest guy in the world. Like, this is amazing. But even at my age, I want to work the way I want to work now. It's created opportunities for all generations. It may be greater among a younger generation. But when we talk about that, the way we work, how has the changes in the way we work, how has that impacted HR? Because it seems like if you break down departments, it's had the most significant impact for companies within the HR department. So how has it impacted HR for you?
Yeah, what I kind of like, somebody else said this, not me, but they said, what kind of the financial crisis was to finance in 2009, 10, 11, that's what COVID was to HR. I mean, it was suddenly like, holy smokes, we're at the middle of this. And then coming out of COVID, it wasn't just the figuring out remote work, it was that it put us into one of the toughest job markets I think any of us have ever seen in our career. I lead compensation, and it wasn't fun for a year and a half to lead compensation, because you're just like constantly behind. You're like, okay, how do you keep up with, especially the frontline workforce, how do you keep up with them? What subsidies are they getting now for that job? Okay, what do I pile on top of that? The salaried professional workforce suddenly, I think, has now fully and rightly sort of renegotiated the value proposition about what it means to work in a either a hybrid fashion, et cetera. I don't know that. I mean, how many of you go into the office 5 days a week? Right? How many of you will ever go back to a company that makes you go into the office 5 days a week? Right? So it's, we've there's a new value prop that we've sort of tried to figure out. So again, I don't know all the answers. I think we're working through it and being, absolutely ready to not accept any new normal and constantly change, I think is part of it. But yeah, let's just all give ourselves a little bit of credit and grace for the fact that you're in the function at the center of, I think, the future of work.
And it's interesting you say that. You asked the question about going in the office 5 days a week, and I think when we talked last week, I think you mentioned like like this new workforce has defined like 2 work roles, because not anyone in this room goes in 5 days a week, but there are people, and probably people in your companies, that go 5 days a week. So now you're not working with one uniform workforce any longer. You're working with 2 different defined workforces. And how does that make it even more difficult to navigate HR and meeting all the needs of what an employee wants to experience within their company?
Yeah, I can tackle that. Within Ideal, we absolutely face that because we have multiple manufacturing sites, New Zealand, Boston, here in the Chicago area, some other locations, but those are the major areas. And that's why I go back to that approach where I said it used to be we'd have one kind of common overlay approach. Thou must all be in the office. And people have struggled. I tend to put it through the lens of the generations. But much of the decision makers, I will say, struggle in some ways with working and understanding, managing by, and we're talking about what's still the same. In HR, we've all talked about managing by objectives forever. And we've always said we should be a results-driven or performance-driven culture. And now, all of a sudden that it's shown up, we still have leaders that are going back to what our parents might have taught us of you go to the office, you get there before your boss, and you don't leave before your boss leaves. And there's a number of people that still expect that, or the culture piece. So I'll just, for practical examples, we're very deliberate and intentional about how to help bring the culture, because our leadership team, I am one of while the company's headquartered in Sycamore, Illinois, of our leadership team of 7, 2 of us live in Illinois. So the rest of the team is elsewhere, and we get together once a week. And so you'll hear the contrast with Nicole of we don't always have leaders on site on a regular basis. We do travel, we go to the other locations. But it's not, and that's been hard as a family-run business because there used to be a family member that was on site for years and years and years. And so this has been different to have an outside CEO. But what we do from a culture standpoint is we create communication plans, themes. We interweave things with kind of our performance management, our marketing, even our initiatives around our employee resource groups to really help drive and create belongingness. It takes a lot of pre-planning to make that work, but that's how we're addressing the need for it isn't one size that fits all. It's not going back to one size fits all. And so we have to meet people where they are, and it looks different. So it's a lot more complex, but I would argue it's way more fun. And I appreciate the opportunity to really listen and hear from people outside of the US or other locations or other demographics to be able to really make sure that what we're doing resonates. And that's why I think, again, getting more people involved and engaged in the business, it goes beyond HR. And so I just want to call that out, that in the past, it was always, I think everybody thought we had all the answers. And in order to do things and be successful post-pandemic, you have to be willing and have the humility to ask other people in and be willing to listen, because they've got really great ideas for how you can support what your organization needs and meet people where they're at.
It's really good. I think what I would add is, so with Goodwill, from a Goodwill perspective, we have a very small percentage, what I would say out of our 5,400 people, we have a very small percentage of people that work remote and hybrid. So they're more in our corporate services and then predominantly in like small areas of our mission space. And those are jobs that, like our job coaches and such, that really weren't in an office anyway, right? They were already traveling. So I probably have a smaller percentage possibly of people that are working that hybrid or remote. However, we still have the challenge of our businesses and people in our businesses that have to be on site having a little resentment around that, right? It's seen as a perk that you get to work from home, and perhaps it is, but I think that's where we probably struggle the most. We have our retail, obviously our retail, 70 retail stores, but we also support Naval Station Great Lakes. Those are essential workers on the base. They have to, 1,000 people, they have to be at work. We have a laundry facility at 91st Street. Those are essential roles that provide linen and laundry services to hospitals and VAs. So those individuals have to be on site. So I think, when we look across our businesses, there still is a little bit of challenge when people see others that don't have to come in, but they have to arrive, punch a time clock, be there for a certain period of time. I think we haven't necessarily solved for people's feelings around that necessarily. I think in our corporate services, what we have leaned into is that we have been able to employ more people and more talent across our territory, which is what we want to be able to do because people don't have to come into a corporate location. So those barriers that existed for individuals that otherwise wouldn't have been able to have gainful employment with us have, in some cases, been resolved by being able to do hybrid or remote. So those are things that we like to talk about often. On the culture piece, what I would say is, we have also, from an HR perspective, my team and myself have really brought into the conversation that culture is not just about sitting around a boardroom table or being able to whiteboard together somewhere. Culture goes way beyond that. Culture goes beyond, is how we lead and how we develop people and how we connect with people, and not just in person. That's not to deflect that in person. It isn't powerful. It is. But that right balance can still be achieved, and you can still create culture through your policies and your practices and your leadership that create a really strong culture. We're still figuring it out. There are leaders that are a little bit more comfortable in this space and managing in a virtual environment than others. But that's really where we've spent some of our time and resource.
Yeah, so on that note, Nicole, how do you advise leadership in balancing the relationship between measuring outcomes and identifying culture and building culture? That's a really tricky balance to work through, and it's part of HR's role to advise leadership how to navigate that. What are some strategies you've used, or what are some successes that you guys may have had in doing so?
Well, since you asked me the question, I'll go first. But what I would say is the pandemic I referenced before, I think we can all agree that it kind of took away that idea that people can't be productive at home. And I maybe some of you will disagree, but I think that we found that people can be productive, and in some cases, in some roles, even more productive than they were coming into the office. Now, we've had to counterbalance that a bit because I have people working on their drive time, right? And they're working these, and now we have the stress levels that are going up, right? And we have burnout that's going up. So there's counterbalance there. I think what we've done with our leaders is just made sure that we really, through development programs and through the leadership connections that we have, talk about what works for them in their area, because that one-size-all approach is not going to work. What works for my accounting team and my FP&A team may not work for the payroll team or may not work for IT. So we're trying to have our business partners really work arm in arm with the leaders to say, what is good for you and your team? And that was, I still think we still have to try, because things even evolved here from the pandemic, right? There's still people struggling a little bit with product. Is this the role? Is it productive enough? But I just have to say, we haven't seen the productivity be the issue. It's more, how do I manage in this virtual environment? That's been the conversation, not productivity, which I think that's what we all feared for years, right? We can't work hybrid, we can't work remote. People won't be productive. They'll be doing their laundry, whatever it was, right? And maybe people are doing their laundry, but they're still getting their meetings done, right?
Not me. I've never done laundry during a workday, just so that's clear.
I have, and I watched the Amazon driver bring me stuff. I'm like, I am a rock star. I am working, and my stuff's coming. This is good. I haven't ordered while I was at work, but you know what I'm saying. So I think it hasn't been as much for us around productivity. It's really been around the conversations, and the partnership is around how do you manage in a virtual environment and create that culture, keep that culture going. So that's been more my experience.
Yeah, There's a lot of good stuff in there. And I admit I absolutely have done laundry on my work at home days. So for what it's worth, our headquarters group is, there's maybe 400, 500, 600, I don't know, some odd people that could be, kind of tied to a headquarters. The IT group, we've largely sort of said you're more local remote. We've got the full remote world where you can tap the workforce anywhere. And then we've got people who are hybrid. And for us, hybrid's like 2 to 3 days a week. So I think it's probably not that different than what a lot of folks have done. And in some ways, what I've sort of decided is I'm very task productive on my home days, and I'm a little more people productive on my in-person days. So the only difference is I do challenge myself. If I'm in there and there are people around, and I got 15 minutes between something, and, at home I do emails, or if I'm a bit of an introvert, I'd probably want to do emails anyway. So I challenge myself, get out there and be people productive. Bring back that water cooler a little bit. And that helps with culture some, but I'm with you. It's like you can build culture in any which way. You don't have to be together to build culture. And I think some of it starts with, in some ways, what I think HR is really good at, which is we see people as a good in and of themselves, right? We see their experience as an important good in and of itself. And we also realize that driving the business forward is an important good. And I think in some ways we get to have this wonderful role of this sacred caretaker between balancing those two things, people and the productivity of the business. And so I think we all work for companies, fortunately, that know that to be true in and of itself, whether because they have a philanthropic arm or, the family. I think family businesses often have that in them. KHE's a family business as well. KHE's a family name. So we care about people in themselves. So most of my leaders get that, and that's one place I start with balancing culture and, people. Don't we all agree that we care about driving the business and that we can create a great experience for people, that they can still be members of their community, that they can be good family members, and, et cetera. So some of it's starting with the philosophy and then thinking about, well, how do you weave some of the cultural pieces into the productivity stuff anyway? So, Michele.
I'm going to dive in on this one. I'm going to do it more from the business side. And so one of the pieces that we've been working really hard with an Ideal is to drive a cultural shift and a bit of a mindset shift. And so some of the things when we think about outcomes, I would say one of the paradigms we're trying to break is people are scared to take risk. And I think probably everybody in this room needs to drive innovation. You need greater collaboration. You need the ability to fail fast. And so, and to learn from it. And so we've been working very thoughtfully about how to help create and celebrate when the process works, when we make decisions that tell us, we should not launch this product, or we should not do this, or our resources and focus is better over here. So I just want to highlight to the points you were asking. We really drive focus. We really are trying to drive a learning organization, but not learning in the sense that HR tends to think of it, but more from the business sense of, hey, can you fail fast and create the resilience to show people not everybody gets fired. It's okay. If there was shared risk in the right points. And then the culture piece, I'll just encourage, and I had a business leader, we wove it into our performance management. So I know a lot of performance management processes actually have the values. We ultimately think the values piece was pretty ingrained. And so now that's one piece when we have discussions. We ask people, what are you doing in support of the culture so that it doesn't just give the impression that it's solely them or the leader or something else, that everyone has an accountability. So hopefully those are some tips that you could apply.
It's really good stuff. We look at over the almost last 4 years now since the workplace has started to change. A lot of catchphrases, new terms come out, and one of them is the employee experience. Employee experience. It was something that we never discussed before. In the past, you would graduate, you'd get a job, or maybe you wouldn't even graduate college. You'd go right to a company and you'd work 40, 50 years, and you get a gold watch at the end, and then you retire, and then that's your life. Very different now, and the employee experience is part of that engagement now. And what's developed is a new reciprocity, a reciprocal relationship between employer and employee, where before it was just, all right, I'm giving you a job, that's what you get from me. Now there needs to be more, and the employee wants something in return. You invest in me, I'll invest in you. How have you seen that type of philosophy, that mindset shift among the American employee impact your business and your role in HR?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly, you're absolutely right. We did not have a group doing employee experience 5 years ago. And we now have a small emerging team starting to think about, let's map out the moments that matter across the life cycle and how, and so, yeah, I mean, it's changed, like literally we're structuring more around it. It feels like it's coming up with the younger generation, but as always is the case, they're asking for the things we all realized we wanted all the time anyway.
We just never knew we could ask for them.
Oh, you can ask
exactly.
for that. Michele and I were joking earlier. It's like, what was it like? Imagine in 2014, somebody coming into you, and and it's someone on your team, right? And they're like, "Hey, I got to go home a little early because my cat's not feeling real well, and it's been really weighing on me, and I need to." And as I say it, I sound like I'm making fun of that. I'm not necessarily saying that's bad. They're like, we now treat people as whole people more, and inclusive of their feelings of their cat. And somebody actually did come up the other day, and they were like, "What is the leave policy for my cat?" And I was like, "It's like actually, I don't know. I've never even thought to ask that in my whole career." And I realized my dog passed away in the spring, and I never even thought to ask about leave, because I grew up in a slightly different generation. So yes, we're starting to think about it differently. But now the question is exactly like, how do we leverage this and not forget that we have to drive the business, right? But how do we weave this in? So I don't know, Michele, you've got better answers than I do on how to solve this, but we're definitely thinking about it now.
I think at least you could say it's related to the pandemic, but I also think that this whole employee experience really came from watching what our business partners did in terms of customer experience. Yeah. And so again, I keep saying that there's things that people are saying, "Oh, this is so new and different." And I would argue, no, I kind of feel like we were starting to have some of these conversations beforehand. I talked earlier about the resistance that we used to face on many of these things. So I would just add, I think what is nice for all of HR is prior to the pandemic, we were raising some of these ideas. We knew that we needed to be able to do these things, and everybody treated them as, yeah, that's a nice to have, or I don't know, what's going to be the ROI on that? And again, we've got to get better as business partners around the ROI, whereas now the literature is caught up. And so suddenly the same ideas that we told them about 2 years ago, everyone's like, we should be doing that. It's like, oh, great, we'll work on that. But meanwhile, we've been working on it. So I just think the whole employee experience about focusing on the key life cycle points, again, ours is focused on attraction and retention. And so it seems to make sense, but it is a rabbit hole. So for those that have not started, I would just encourage, try and identify what's the greatest need within your organization and maybe go after that, because once you start pulling on this thread, it has a lot of different touch points.
Yeah, it's just really interesting that we finally in 2023, almost 2024, we're looking at employees as a whole person. And as you mentioned that, saying that we're actually engaged with the whole person now. And they're not just this work machine that's an asset or a tool to our company. So it's crazy that it's taken this long to do that. And it's part of the pandemic, part of a younger generation coming in the workforce. Whatever it is, we know it's for the better. Nicol, did you want to add to that?
Just that I think how I think about that in terms of employee experiences. Employer experience to me is the new employer of choice. I think this has been here the whole time. Right, because how long did we talk about employer of choice before? We want to be the employer. But the mindset has shifted now to how do we get to be an employer of choice is by going through and understanding the person's experience. So I have a little bit different of a take on it in the way that I think about it. I think it's been here the whole time. What I loved what you said though is I think with the employee experience, part of HR's role is really now adding some data analytics and insights to that to understand and employee perspectives to really understand what does the experience need to look like for each of us to be an employer of choice or a career destination for a group of individuals or with certain skills sets that we need to drive the business. So that's the only thing I would add, because I know we don't have a ton of time, but I think it's always been here. It's just a way that we're shifting our mindset around it. And I bet it'll be something different in the next 10 years, probably too. And then we'll look back and we'll say, look, we started here and then we went here and now we have this. And that's what I've been challenging my employee experience team to do. we've really turned that into an employee insights team. So they really drive surveys, metrics, data insights, and then we pull that together to understand what does the experience need to be from our employees' perspectives and the market. And then that, again, I think the one size fits all. Employer choice was like, here, you do these total rewards programs, and if you do them all right, everybody will come. and that's just not true, and it wasn't true then either. And so I think now it is really about understanding and really customizing things for the diversity that we have within our organizations. And we all have diversity because it's multiple levels, right? There's multiple ways to look at diversity. So that's what I would offer.
I just have to add and give compliments to the idea of how cross-disciplinary you've been thinking about this, because that's a great way to do innovation is you look outside your field and you're like, what are other people doing? And I always say, if you're stuck in HR, go look at marketing. They've done a lot of this stuff for a while. You know, the idea of continuous listening, you know, you would never have surveyed your customers once a year, you know, but we did that all the time in the place. So it's a great idea just to get out of the discipline. And then to your point, there's certain things that have always been here that have worked, and don't give up on those either. So how do you blend what's been working with some new ideas out there? Sorry, Michele.
No, I just wanted to compliment Nicole and tell her I'm totally stealing that insights business. Yeah. That's going to show up somewhere strategic very soon.
Here, you got your nugget for today. You can go home.
It's been interesting, the transition of that and being able to look at that as a key capability and how we build that for the organization has been well received. And I was like, whew, thank goodness, because this could have gone very badly for me. But I think that is something that we've really leaned into. And I know you have some questions around HR capabilities for the future and such, so I won't go there. But we have really turned that internal to say, let's understand what this means to our employee population, our value proposition, people that want to come and work here, and then how do we look at that across dimensions of a diverse population.
I think one really interesting shift too in the workplace, and we've seen this over the last several years, people not staying in jobs very long and still getting hired at other companies for even better roles and even higher paying roles where, like 10 or 15 years ago, if you quit a job after 6 months and then you went to another job and left there 6 months, like your third employer is going to look at you and go, why aren't you staying anywhere? And now I have a friend of mine that we started working together in 2018. He's on his 8th company currently, and he keeps advancing in his roles and his pay and his responsibility, where 10, 15 years ago, that was frowned upon. And you're clearly not a very good employee. You don't stay. So just that whole mindset there, I think is really beneficial to being able to find what's best for you moving forward. We mentioned a few different times defining moments over a life cycle, the employee life cycle. What are those defining moments for all of you? And then we'll start taking some questions in the audience if you guys want to ask any questions as well.
Oh boy, yeah.
I'll start.
Yeah, go ahead.
So where we're focused on is, I go back to where our demographic shift needs to be. I need desperately to attract millennials and Gen Z. I don't know if anyone else is experiencing this, but I attract millennials, I train millennials, and then, much like we just discussed, they're off to the next opportunity. So I'm on the hamster wheel. And so really just continuing to try and create processes and that environment that'll allow me to bring that kind of talent into the organization is really where we're focused on the employee experience. So attraction, and to some degree, as we deploy talent in the organization, I'm trying to get my leaders, I'm going back to what's old, but it's new again. Yes, we should actually have successful onboarding plans as people transition internally. So again, we try and start small, master a few things, and then we go to the next thing. So we're going to solve for talent acquisition and then bringing them in. And then for when we deploy, we're going to do it with excellence. And then we'll go on to another part of the life cycle. But that's as far as we've gotten in the last 18 months.
No, that's really good, because I was going to say one of the ways you deal with it is you do help people continue to move within your organization and grow. And, I always say it's like there's no reason to hold back on doing career development inside. Yes, you'll make them more marketable, but that is the value proposition. And if you can make them more marketable and grow them faster than anyone else can, they'll stay with you, ironically. So you just have to lean into that. It was a past company, it was Sears Holdings, which had its good and bad sides. But I remember one of the things we did in building our predictive attrition models that we found was the reason people stayed was they had some positive event happen to them in the last, it was roughly 12 months. So it's almost like it was a job move, a pay change, a title change, a something pushes a reset in somebody's brain. So in terms of moments, kind of mapping it through the life cycle, again, the ones we're looking at here at CHRO is we're trying not to take people for granted early on, so 30, 60, 90 kind of touch points, little mini surveys, the kind of, and then we're trying to get people just to do something on the anniversaries. So it's just like, hey, congrats on 2 years. How's it going? And so we're trying to kind of keep touch points going. If we can, same thing, if we can just find that we can get people to change their job a little bit or just add something new to their portfolio, those things really matter for people. I think ultimately what people care about is there's this little thing in the back of their brain that they're asking themselves, am I progressing at the rate that I think I should be, slower or faster? And often they have somebody else in mind that they're watching, and am I progressing as fast as Billy over there or Sally over there? We all have that person, by the way. And so if you can just help them feel as though they're growing continuously, I think that's a key part of keeping those millennials. But we'll only keep some of them. They'll get on the hamster wheel and leave us.
I'll just add to, and I'll talk about it from more of a programmatic perspective. So instead of the milestone moments, though we do look at the data that shows us where we have people turning over or leaving the organization, exiting, one of the things that we learned just by looking at that information is people can be actively developing in the organization, but they may not understand how to navigate to their next move, right? And if you don't have defined career paths that people can take, where do they go? How do they get the coaching? How does somebody talk with them about, oh, so you have interest in this. Have you considered these 3 other careers within our organization, right? So because those paths can become so linear if there's not somebody to help them. So we have implemented a career coaching program that has a navigation component. So that's just one small example of how we've looked at moments and said, well, if we wanted to get to the root cause of why those individuals, someone would choose to stay or leave, let's at least implement something where that coach is not just helping them develop their skills and reflect on, where they want to go, but how they would actually get there. So that's one of the things that we've implemented recently. The other thing I would say is I really think there's, in these moments, one of the other things we've spent time on, and I think we have to continue to evolve, is what role the leader plays in that staff retention and how they are helping people grow and develop and find their way and navigate in the organization. I think coaching is an incredibly powerful piece, and it's not natural to all, but stepping in as a leader and understanding our accountability to helping coach and grow people and help them find those paths for mobility, I think is really important. And so that's something that's key in our leadership development programs.
Any questions out in the audience want to ask? Anything at all?
Can run a mic over to you if
you want. You want a mic, or you
can
scream
yell.
at us?
We'll hear you.
Okay.
So I'm curious about what you're doing to build resiliency within your, I know that's not just HR's job, but what you're doing to foster resiliency and avoid burnout. And I bring that up just because I was listening to an Adam Grant podcast in the last month. He was interviewing a small business owner that actually required employees to take time off every 8 weeks. The research shows that it's more about frequency of time off and not necessarily duration. So like 2 weeks off is no better than 1 week. But anyway, he would require people to take time off every 8 weeks. And if you responded to work emails while you were off, you actually got docked pay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I was just curious if you're doing anything innovative, or what are you doing to foster resiliency?
I will just say it was not innovative, and we just stumbled into it, but we actually had a big push over this last year to try to get people to, and we've probably all done this, try to get them to put their PTO into the system, right? And the reason we were doing it is because we just didn't want to pay people out when they left, right? So we saw, we'll save a couple $100,000 if we could just get this put in there. What it also revealed, though, were all the places where people legitimately were not taking vacation. And so then we kind of then looped back around. We had a whole nother push around, okay, if you're not putting PTO in, either you're lying to us, but we found a bunch of people whose managers were sort of heavy-handed on them around not taking PTO. And so we had a big push around that as well. And so I hadn't thought about docking pay if they left, but we definitely had some pushes to say, okay, we want people to take PTO, or paid time off, right? We want them to take their vacation because it's part of, we didn't call it resiliency, but it's because of part of whole person healthy is what we call it. So that wasn't very innovative. Do you have any?
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything more innovative, but I will say this is, I think, a good message tone from the top. So, for example, our CEO, when he's off, he is off. And so I do the best when I'm gone. I role model for people when they're off. There's really, in the time I've been here, there hasn't been a crisis where I've had to call somebody. So I think the more that you role model what the expectations are around time off, we do still struggle. We have the same insights around our survey that people, while they're working flexibly, they're working longer, they're definitely feeling burnout. We could get into some of the things outside of work besides puppies that are taking up their time. And so as a consequence, we're working through that. The other thing is, and this was a tough sell, but this is the nice thing about being in a family-run business, we actually are investing and we've given more time off. Now, selfishly, I'll tell you the business reason was we had different vacation policies, paid time off, just from all the acquisitions. And one of the things we did was clean that up. But in addition to the 5 days that Illinois is providing, we changed our vacation time to allow, instead of having to wait till 5 years before you get more time, we stair step. We've added our 5 days for Illinois are known as flex days. We did add a holiday. We ultimately are trying to do more things that allow for that time to refresh. And then the other piece, and people might not, they don't take advantage of it, but for organizations, and I think many of us have it, if you have at least 4 hours or 2 days, which is what we have, of volunteer time off, we really push for people, back to this need for connection and that, for people to go do something else that can really help rejuvenate. So that's the closest thing I can give you to innovative is use your volunteer time off and make sure you're marketing that program.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce that is a powerful thing, and it's something I hadn't seen in a lot of places until I came to KHE, and when we use our foundation dollars, not only to do things outside, but to set up serving opportunities for employees themselves. And so we'll even do multi-day serving trips, even internationally. We had one that was going to Nepal a week ago, and we did cancel it given kind of the global climate. But we have one still going to Honduras. So we'll even go to places, that aren't necessarily, they're a little out there. But we have all these groups we were working with anyway, and we were like, we should bring some of our people along. And it kind of got going over several years. One of our favorite ones is in Laredo, Texas, and we've had now something like 1,500 employees go over the last 20 years. But when people go and they serve together, there's something incredibly powerful that happens. And I used to take people on ropes courses or other kinds of things, and you can do team building in a certain way, but something about serving a real need together, talk about pushing reset and creating some resilience. Now, they come back more tired than when they left, but they're more alive, they're more connected. So I do think they're connecting people to purpose, again, it's not a new idea, but it's powerful.
So I would say yes, yes, and yes. We've done all of those things, adding the holiday, increasing time, the volunteer hours. I would say the other thing we've done is expand and deepen our bereavement policy. So then when people, and we've expanded it to what it covers and the number of days. So there's some things in time off there. The other thing, and I think this is probably the most powerful, well, I'll give you one dry one though. We also, from an HR perspective, do actually monitor. We pull PTO reports and PTO usage, and we spot check to see where PTO is not being used so that our business partners can just gently go in and figure out what's going on and why aren't people taking time off, that kind of thing. But I would say the other thing that's really powerful is we really kind of live by if someone needs time off and they come and ask you for it, don't make them pay for asking. I don't know how else to say that, but I don't know. I have worked for organizations or an organization before where, I can ask for that time off, but I paid for it after, right? And one of the things I can tell you that most of our employees say is, I feel very supported when I need time off, and I need to ask my leader. I feel like I get that, and people care. that I needed it. So, I mean, that's just something generally that we've seen in practice that really goes a long way.
And I would say this as we're going through as a group here, stick around for a little bit, hang out with us as well. But talk about best practices that you've experienced, that you've implemented amongst the discussion that we talked about. We didn't even get into technology in HR, but we can do that amongst ourselves and just talk about and just share with each other some things you've learned, some things you've experienced, good or bad, that maybe we can walk away with together today. Big round of applause for our panelists today. Did a fantastic job.
Well, again, thank you all for having us. I'm excited to continue the conversation, learn from you all. One of the other good prompt questions that I think we didn't get to, but we should all be thinking about is who in the future of work may be left behind? And what are we doing now to continue to support everybody as we continue to take care of people as a good in and of itself? So excited to continue the conversation. Thanks for having me.
You pitched it to me, and I'm going to say in conversation the question I don't think we got to today is, and I'm curious to learn from you, is what do you believe and what do we think is going to be so important in terms of HR practitionership in the future, and what are those core competencies and capabilities as we think about HR of the future? I don't think we got there today, and I would love to hear from all of you on how you're thinking about that as well.
And the takeaway that I have is I would just push for community. I know that we're encouraging everybody to stick around, but I think we all know we're facing many, many challenges. And so the opportunity to be able to have other people that you can say, hey, I'm thinking about this, or hey, I heard this, being able to really build some of the relationships in the room, I think is just really important, so that you've got other people that you can call and accelerate. And so when somebody asks you for something and you've got like 5 days to do it, usually you don't have to start with a blank piece of paper. If you start with somebody, there's usually something great. We can help each other out. And I'm just really proud to be part of such a strong community, and however I can help anyone, happy to do so.
Thank you. All right, thank you once again.